to Awaken to Freedom. I'm your host, Jada. Today's topic does deal with sensitive issues, such as topics of abuse and CSA. Viewer discretion is advised.
The elder said to the other elders in the governing body, yeah, I'm not letting Jehovah take care of this. I'm a cop, and this is a crime, and I'm going to the cops about this. That didn't go over well because he ended up being removed as an elder and disfellowshipped. And then after that, this Watchtower article came out in which it says in paragraph 19 that you can no longer have an exemplary position in the congregation, which would mean like an elder, a ministerial servant, a pioneer, and have a job in which you carry a weapon.
Oh, my word. So that's basically just saying we don't want anybody reporting this anymore. So no more cops. Oh, my God. To Awaken to Freedom. I'm Jada, your host, and today my guest is Deanna June. To some of you, she may be known as Just June from her XJW channel on YouTube. And though she hasn't been making content for the last year due to time issues, her channel is still very much available to watch previous videos that she and her family have made. She was born and raised as a JW for 45 years before exiting from the organization. She's also a recovering alcoholic, a wife, and mother of two. She's here to talk about the severe struggles, frustrations, and hardships that she has had to navigate through, but how she's found happiness, peace, and sobriety on the other side. So welcome, Deanna.
Thank you so
nice
much,
to have
Jada.
you here.
Appreciate being here. I love your channel.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, it's a fairly new channel, but we're getting some content out there. So you are the perfect addition to that content. So it's so great to have you. I did get to watch some of your Just June videos. And I recommend that anybody listening go and watch those because she has some amazing content out there that I know would be very helpful to watch for sure.
Yeah, I wish I had the time to make more videos, but unfortunately at the moment, it's just not anything I can do right now.
But maybe in the future, you never know, right?
Yeah, that's why I haven't taken it down. And I think,
Right.
like you said, what's there is helpful to many. I still get, I get emails all the time from people. So
Oh, that's great. Yeah, and if the viewers go and subscribe, then they'll be notified when you do put new content up.
yes.
Perfect. So, Deanna, can you tell us what it was like growing up in that organization, Jehovah's Witness organization? Because you were in there for a long time.
Yeah, I was. I was born and raised here in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and by two, loving parents that raised me in it, meaning well. They were doing it not because of anything more than they thought it would be a good thing. And I know that's not everyone's story. And so when I tell all of this, I say that, you might relate to some of what I say, and some of what I say might not be what you relate to, but it's true to what I dealt with. Born and raised as a witness, though my parents became witnesses, they were not born and raised themselves, so I'm not like a generational witness. Though, interesting fact, my great-grandmother became a witness in her 60s. Super crazy story. I won't get into that right now. But so there were other witnesses in the family, but it wasn't generational. And I had some like random cousins and stuff that became Jehovah's Witnesses. So overall, okay childhood. Unfortunately, I did deal with some CSA as a child, had nothing to do with the Jehovah's Witnesses. And I put that out there because as I go through telling you about some things that is neat, it makes sense why I tell you that. Not easy to cope with things like that. Life was not easy being raised in the 70s and 80s, as a lot of, Gen Xers know. You're doing a lot on your own. And even as a witness, you're left to, cope and deal with things in crazy ways. The one thing, you, Jada and I, we talked some. One story I didn't tell you that I will say as far as how things are so horrifically handled as a Jehovah's Witness. When I was in my late teens, I think I was 17. I'm almost positive I was 17. I was out door to door with a sister that was 19 and her two brothers. One was the same age as me and one was a year and a half younger than us. And it was at mid-afternoon. We were all, well, she was a regular pioneer. The rest of us were auxiliary pioneering that month. And it was summertime. And I need to mention that they were all African American for this story to be understood as well. We went to the door and a man came to the door, and it was a very sunny day. You could not see inside. The door was open, but the screen door was there, and you couldn't really see in well because it was so sunny. And a sawed-off shotgun pushed the door open. He pushed the door open, the screen door open with the sawed-off shotgun, and held it to her head, called her some very horrific slurs, and told us both to get the hell off his property. Well, he didn't say hell, he said the F word. I don't want to swear on your channel. And he was horrific. We were terrified. 19, 17, another 17-year-old, and then he would have been like 15 and a half. That was the car group that was out that day. This shows you how we should not, this was in the 80s, people should not be sending people door to door to sell religion, sorry. And, we all got in the car, we were obviously visibly shaken, we were very overwhelmed. And, he put the sawed-off shotgun up to our heads, like put them right in our face. These really scary teenage girls. And we went back to the Kingdom Hall and told the elder and few people that were all out. Our congregation was quite large, and we had a lot of pioneers at the time. 80s was a booming time for the witnesses. And the response we got was, yeah, that persecution's pretty bad. All right, let's make groups for the afternoon. Who's going out late afternoon? That was the entire response we got. Oh, we should put that on the do not call list. That was it. That was the entire response we got for a sawed-off shotgun getting put to two teenage girls' head. No one called the police. Nothing. So, I go to therapy now, and I told my therapist that story, and she's like, that is highly traumatizing. And I was like, yeah, I guess it is. And you were a witness.
Right. And so when I was a kid, I live in Canada, so we don't even have, we have gun laws that restrict, but you can still have shotguns and permits for stuff. But I had a similar story, not nearly as dramatic as yours, but when I was a little kid, I was with my parent going door to door, and I think it was my mom. And the guy had the shotgun visibly sitting at the door. And he basically said, get the F off my property or I'm grabbing that gun. Right? So and I got a very similar response. Oh, persecution. It shows we're doing the right thing. Right? It's like, oh my God. So
I'm like, okay, this is reasonable. Okay.
Right?
So, these are the things that I dealt with, as I think many witnesses have, and we just made a group and went out late afternoon into the evening. We were pioneering. We had to get our time.
Oh my word. I can't even imagine that a gun to your head and then they're just telling you to just go back out there. Like you were literally just assaulted, Deanna, basically.
Rally.
Oh.
So, very crazy things that I'm sure many of us could tell, but yeah, very involved. My dad was an elder. My mom was very active in the congregation. She was not a pioneer or anything, but very active. She had to work full time, just because of our life circumstances. And so then I met my husband when I was 18, and we started dating not long after we met. And we hit it off quite quickly, and I really like that we didn't live in the same state, and a lot of our dating was on the phone, and so we really got to know one another. Because so much of our time was talking on the phone, and fortunately, both of our parents let us talk on the phone privately, and we talked late at night. I mean, half the time they were in bed, so they didn't know what we were saying. So we actually really got to know each other, that I think a lot of witnesses don't get that chance and have to intimately get to know their partner before they get married as a witness. I don't think that is common. And I'm so thankful for it, because we talked about everything. Like, we really were best friends, and we dated, we were friends for a good 6 months before we started dating. And then we dated for another 6 or 7 months, I can't remember for sure, before we got engaged. And then we were engaged for like 8 months before we got married. So we had a little bit of time of getting to know one another and everything. And I will say it is some of the happiest memories I have in my life was dating him, because it was not, trust me, it was sexually frustrating, but like all Jehovah's Witnesses stories. And we did wait, barely, but we waited. But we really enjoyed each other. And I'm sort of glad, like I said, that we were far away and did so much of our dating on the phone and talked to each other and got to know each other so well. And even though we were opposites in many ways, but we had a lot of things in common too. I try not to get into too much of my family's stories with my parents and stuff, because I still have a good relationship with my parents, believe it or not, even though I'm not disfellowshipped or removed, whatever you want to call it. I didn't disassociate, and I actually have a decent relationship with, especially my mom, but sort of there with my dad. And so I don't talk about them too much on my channel or in interviews, because it's not my story to tell. So there were things that happened in my childhood that I could go into, but I just choose not to, that were not ideal. But I think a lot of us as witnesses could probably tell some of those stories as well. But, overall that was all good. And the meeting my husband was great. But then that's when the poop hit the fan. Meeting my husband was the best thing in the world and quite interesting. His father is quite a notorious character in the Jehovah's Witness world, and people would not know that. We don't go around saying like, well, you know who my husband's father-in-law is, and they wouldn't know, because the Jehovah's Witnesses try to keep it all on the down low. So I don't know if you want me to get into all of who he is.
Oh yeah,
well, who he was. He's dead. He's dead, fortunately. Right. And you'll understand why I say fortunately in a minute. So there is an interview on my YouTube channel of me interviewing my husband. And in the first 3.5 minutes of the interview, he explains that his father was an elder. His father was one of the most charismatic men I've ever met. Very good looking, super charming. That's the typical of, these types of men. I think he was like the coordinator for their circuit and for circuit assemblies and stuff, or conventions or something like that, like very involved. And he also was like a huge pedophile, like unbelievably horrific pedophile. And when my husband was 8, his world came crashing down because my father-in-law got found out. Finally, fortunately, 2 young girls in the congregation. Now, this is before I was on the scene, so I'm taking you back a little. But my husband, told me about all this. He went, so in I want to say it was late 1982, I believe, that my father-in-law got finally caught. 2 young girls that were literal sisters, so not like just the term sisters and brothers in the congregation, we could use 2 little girls that were sisters, accused my father-in-law of abusing them. And I will try to be as good as I can with terms, because I know this is, for YouTube, you have to be careful with how you say things. So I'll try to keep that in mind. But he was essaying them, and they were 5 and 7, just so we are clear on their ages. And they came to the elders, and the thing is, their dad was also a fellow elder as well. And his own daughter had come forth and said that she was in fact being abused by him, and it had sort of fell on deaf ears. She brought this to the attention of the elders, and it had fell on deaf ears. And this can all be, by the way, documented, because Barbara Anderson, this was the first case that she heard about, and I actually sent you documentation about this. It's, I believe it's in the Internet Archives, and you can look up all of the things. It's under the notes of Barbara Anderson. I forget what the exact thing is, but you can look it up, and it talks about a man from upstate New York. It's the first time she hears of it, and she heard of it in the very beginning of 1984, but it was a young woman from the congregation my father-in-law went to, and that's how she heard about this. It was her first hearing of pedophilia within the Jehovah's Witness organization, and it was my father-in-law. Go ahead.
Can I just ask, can you just clarify who Barbara Anderson is?
Oh, she was the whistleblower, the initial big whistleblower, and I believe in like the 90s, I want to say, that worked up at Bethel, and she basically did all kinds of research. She was one of the first sisters they allowed to do research for various articles and stuff. When they were, writing articles, she would do the research for these different articles, and they normally put brothers in charge of that, and she was one of the first women they allowed to do that. And if you read the archives that I'm talking about, the information she started coming across is insane. Like, not only did she come across the issues with CSA, she came across stuff about Charles Taze Russell, about Rutherford. Like, she came across all kinds of things that she was like, and they were all court cases. Like, it was all stuff that's like, what? This is like documented cases in courts? Like, what? And it was all like hidden. And she's like, do people know about that? Like, do people know what is happening? And so she kept just sort of like letting it go, because she didn't know quite what to do. She would ask other brothers that had been there for a long time, and some of them knew, and be just like, oh, well, And others were like, what are you talking about? But when she finally came to the CSA, that was when she was like, oh no, like, they are defending these horrific men, and these children are being made to feel like they did something wrong, and I can't do this. And so she was who went on Dateline and just blew it up. She is who got all of this started with telling people about what was happening in the world of the Jehovah's Witnesses with CSA. And you can go online and find the old original video of her on Dateline talking about it. And I do believe, if I could be corrected by somebody in the comments if I'm wrong, but I do believe her family still to this day from the 90s has never spoken to her again, her children. So she has, for lack of a better term, has taken one for the team like nobody else, standing up and speaking for all of those young children who needed their voices to be heard. And I can't credit her enough with how brave and unbelievably, powerful she has been for helping so many young children that needed their voices to be heard. So, she's an amazing woman. I don't know her personally, but, I would love to thank her. But yeah, so yeah, she probably doesn't even know that was my father-in-law. Like she doesn't know me, so she wouldn't know any of that. I just know that from reading the archives. Like soon as she explained the details of it in there, I was like, oh yeah, I know exactly who that is. When you read it all, me and my husband were like, oh, that we know exactly, because she talks about it going to court and the whole thing. So we know it is. Absolutely. There's nobody else that went to court at that time. There's nobody else that anything happened like that at the time other than my husband's father. So we know it was him. And all the details are exact. So, so the thing is, though, with my father-in-law is that the only reason he got brought to the police is the other elder whose daughters he had abused was not only an elder, but he was a state cop. And now I know you're thinking, no, that's not possible. But yes, it is. Because before 1983, you could be a cop, a sheriff, any of those things, and be not only a Jehovah's Witness, but an elder. You can look it up. And I'm going to give you the exact article. You can look up the July 1983 Watchtower, and I believe the article is Pursue Peace or something along the lines of Pursuing Peace. I can't remember the exact title. Paragraph 19. And it talks about, and my father-in-law's trial was in the spring of 1983, and this came out in July of 1983. And it's because the elder said to the other elders in the governing body, yeah, I'm not letting Jehovah take care of this. I'm a cop, and this is a crime, and I'm going to the cops about this. That didn't go over well because he ended up being removed as an elder and disfellowshipped. And then after that, this Watchtower article came out in which it says in paragraph 19 that you can no longer have an exemplary position in the congregation, which would mean like an elder, a ministerial servant, a pioneer, and have a job in which you carry a weapon. So,
oh my word. So that's basically just saying we don't want anybody reporting this anymore. So no more cops. Oh right. My God.
Yeah, so my father-in-law was like a huge thing in the organization. Most people don't know any of that, but it is, it's absolutely all true. And I married into that. So I loved my husband enough to deal with all of that because my husband is amazing. Trust me, I can tell you all the things I want to strangle him for too, but he's an amazing person. We've been married for 32 years. So, he's a good guy. But, so that was quite trying. And the thing is, he was disfellowshipped over his lifetime 4 times, all surrounding situations of underage girls and situations. one time leading to him going to prison. He went to prison all of, I had to ask my husband because I couldn't remember, for 3 whole years. That's it. For those crimes. He went to prison for 3 years. That was it. He got off on good behavior and was back at home not too long with his family, and back in the congregation, reinstated within several years.
So back then in the 80s, did they have the same reporting system? I mean, I'm not sure, like that they do now with that you have to be a registered sex offender. Was that obviously not the case? Or were they letting him back in as a registered sex offender?
They were letting him back in as a registered sex offender.
Around all those children. Oh, Jesus.
Oh, yeah. And we were guilted all the time because, like, he was reinstated when we got married. And then I got pregnant with my son after we had only been married for 10 months. So when we got married, we lived in the same, we were in the same congregation as them and lived right there with them. And so when I got pregnant, my husband was like, yeah, we got to go. Like, we gotta leave here. So we weren't in Pittsburgh at the time. That's where I was from. He was not from there. He was from upstate New York, obviously, and that's actually not even where we were at the time. We were in another state. That's where they were all living. And so he was like, yeah, we got to get out of here. So we moved back to Pittsburgh right after. We stayed there while I had my son, just because of circumstances. But when my son was 10 days old, we moved to Pittsburgh. That's how my husband was like, we got to get out of here. We cannot have my dad near any of our kids. And not that this makes anything better, but my father-in-law had never, to any of our knowledge, ever abused boys, but that still didn't matter. We didn't want him near any of our children. So we moved back here. We felt that was our safest move, but that didn't mean anybody in their congregation was safe from him. You know, he was very regular at all the meetings. And when we would go out there to visit other family, because they weren't the only family that lived there, you know, he was at the meeting. He was allowed to go in and out of the bathroom whenever he wanted. You know, there was no rules. There was a downstairs to their Kingdom Hall, and that had like a little apartment, and that's where their second school was. And it was like an odd, older Kingdom Hall. And he seemed to always be lost somewhere in that Kingdom Hall. You know, like, and he did end up getting disfellowshipped. He had already been disfellowshipped once for an affair with a 16-year-old that never did anything. And that was never reported to anybody. Then when he went to prison, and then he was disfellowshipped 2 more times for other things that never came about anything, but they had to do with younger people and accusations. And kept just getting reinstated.
And he obviously was never reported.
Oh no, he was, but they couldn't make anything stick. So.
Oh.
Yeah. It just disgusting. And we were always guilted by the elders that, like, because my mother-in-law, because she was insane, they would always act like, well, you don't want to be around us enough. And we're like, yeah. Like with our kids? No, we don't. You know, and the elders would be like, well, they are, you know, he has been forgiven by Jehovah. And I'd be like, yeah, but that's great. I'll talk to him here at the Kingdom Hall and say hi. And, you know, like, I felt we were generous. Like, we'll go to dinner with them where we're all in a public place, but like, I don't ever want to see this guy again, honestly, but I'm trying to be nice and follow the Jehovah's Witness rules. And I'm sorry, I don't think he needs to ever pick up my child for any reason, ever. I don't think that needs to even be said here. I don't know why you guys are making me feel otherwise. You know, it was, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh, always my goodness. Interesting. And, you know, you can see why, like, something like the Australian Royal Commission,
was such an eye-opener for a lot of people, because you have to wonder how many pedophiles or registered sex offenders are in the congregation that, maybe somebody who's watching this is actually in,
Yeah.
It's just it's an unfortunate haven for those that have those tendencies, like whether that be well, I'm just not even going to get into it, but you know what I mean? Like
Yeah, I know exactly where you're
it's just a haven
going.
for it.
Yeah. And that's just the surface. I can't get into every little detail of everything, unfortunately, but and I have never actually talked about this on any interview before or even on my own channel. It's not fun to talk about, but I do think it's important. And I sort of really wanted to say that fact about the fact that the whole thing about the police changing, like that you can no longer, that's why there's no longer witnesses allowing, the article says a whole nother reason on why you can't carry weapons, and it's about peace and this and that. And I mean, you can throw all that idea in there as well, but that's not the real reason. And I know it.
And that just blew my mind when you told me that in our pre-interview. It literally was just like, blew my mind, although that makes a lot of sense with that organization, that they would do something like that to protect themselves. But it's disgusting. Absolutely disgusting.
Yeah, I mean, I can't prove it. I'm sure they would deny it up and down if people, but I mean, the timing, he got everything how it happened and lined up. And I've had other people that were close to the situation at the time and whatever, they've all verified that, yeah, that's what that was. So I'm like pretty sure that's what that all was. So, but yeah, so that was all a lot to deal with. Dealing with all of that, being newly married, dealing with insane in-laws, dealing with a lot of, I felt like growing up in among that, because, and I say growing up because we got married at 20, so we were kids, as many Jehovah's Witnesses are, getting married and then having kids while we're kids, in my opinion, doing the best we could, trying to stick to the rules. We weren't great at it, but we tried, I mean, we went to all the meetings. I don't mean it like we were like necessarily living a double life or anything, but it was just hard. We didn't have money. At times we were living on food stamps, and WIC was a thing at the time. I don't know if it's a program here in America where you can get, like, if you have children, you can get like milk and cereal and certain grocery items for free or for very discounted prices and stuff. And this was 30 years ago, so I don't know what the programs are now, but we lived off a lot of those things because, typical of most witnesses, we were, not like, I had a 3.9 grade average in high school, and the guidance counselor wanted to talk to me about, possibly getting a scholarship to college. And my dad shut that down in 2 seconds. I wanted to go to art school, and that never happened. So I became a cleaning lady. The typical Jehovah's Witness job. So I've turned it into a little bit more than that, and I do okay now. But that's what I did for years, and I hated it. I was good at it. I'm an excellent cleaning lady, but and like I said, that's not exactly what I'm sort of in that field, but not exactly. But I really wish I would have. I always wanted to be an interior designer or something along those lines. I thought about being even a hairdresser, which is not like the fanciest thing in the world, but it's just something more of what I was interested in. There were so many things, anything in a creative field I wanted to do. not clean. But, I started cleaning at 14, with other pioneers so we could all get our hours. So, so it's just what I had done. And then I had little kids. I had 2 kids by the time I was 27. And, that was life. And I was bipolar all this time, not knowing it. So fortunately, I tended to be more manic than depressive. So that mania kept me busy and going and dealing with little kids, probably a little bit more crazily than I should have. But I was at least a fun mom that was like, let's do crafts till 2 in the morning. I was just like one of those, like, let's a very gung ho. And fortunately, as you said, I'm a recovering alcoholic. I was very fortunate that I didn't get introduced to alcohol until later in life. So that saved me. I did not get introduced to alcohol until I was 37. And I don't mean never. I need to clarify that. When I was younger, I got married at 20. When I was a teenager, I was a teenager a million years ago, so wine coolers were the big thing when I was a teenager, And I have a very high tolerance to alcohol. So I had a few friends that were older than me and could get a wine cooler, so that were 21 when I was, like 17, 18. So I had sipped a wine cooler, but I literally had a few sips. It had no effect on me. And I don't know, I wasn't that interested. And so I was more worried about going and doing and being creative. And I always liked activities and stuff. It just didn't interest me. And because my dad, the one thing I will say, like I said, I don't talk too much about my parents, but my dad would be the first one to tell you this. He was a recovering drug addict. That's one of the things that led him to becoming a Jehovah's Witness. He feels that being introduced to the Jehovah's Witness organization saved him from his drug addiction. So I think I always in the back of my mind thought, I don't want to get overly involved with alcohol or drugs because that addiction factor was in our family. So I don't know, I just never really did much with any of it. And then I got pregnant at 20. So at 21, I was given birth and alcohol was the last thing on my mind. And then as I got older, people would bring wine over once in a while. I would entertain. But I would just pour a glass of wine, put a million ice cubes in it because I liked it cold. It would water down. I'd have 3 sips of it, throw it away. I just literally never drank. I didn't. So alcohol was not a part of my life, and my husband didn't like to drink. So we never had alcohol in the house.
Okay, we are at 37 minutes, so that might be a good place to start the next one now to talk about the alcohol recovering. So what I'm going to do is I am, you know what? I can do the intro after for this part 2. So I'm just going to pause it here. I can mark it. I'm going to mark it. There we go. And we can continue. Okay, so part 2.
So alcohol was not really a big issue or anything I ever thought much about, or not that I didn't have people around me that drank or friends that drank, and some even drank a little more than they should. That's definitely something that happens in the Jehovah's Witness world for sure. But I also have to say I wasn't overly judgmental of most of them. I was of a few that were very close to me. I even lectured somebody once that I thought they were drinking. I didn't call them an alcoholic or anything, but I was like, maybe you want to watch how much you're drinking. I look back now and think oh my God, who was I to be talking? But you live and you learn. They definitely were not drinking that much. I was definitely overreacting. But so yeah, there was a lot of things that happened in between, but I'm not going to get into every little story of my life. And times were not always easy. And I was hitting 37. I also think that I was starting, I have to say too, that I was starting, I think I had always questioned a lot about the organization. I need to preface this with that. I had always thought like disfellowshipping was the most disgusting thing ever. I hated it. My mom had always was like, yeah, we don't really do that. Like, if you see a disfellowship person, you should make sure they know that you still love them. You know, give them a little tap, say hello to them in the bathroom. Like, my mom was so not about the rules. So I did not get raised by my dad, on the other hand, super strict, very different story. But my mom was like, here are our rules as far as being a witness. So I'm very thankful that I had that, because I wasn't raised by somebody who was harsh. And so like I had my own viewpoints, and I made it look good in front of people, but I lived my own thoughts in my everyday life. When I saw disfellowship people, I was always loving. In fact, there was one girl who was disfellowshipped, and her whole family, who were all witnesses, were shunning her. She had just got divorced. I'm not saying she did everything right in her life, and I'm not even meaning as far as that she should have been disfellowshipped. I don't believe in disfellowshipping, but I mean, she had made some bad decisions, but it didn't mean she should be disfellowshipped. She just made some bad decisions. But she needed help. She needed therapy. She needed help to get herself back on track. And she literally lived down the street from me, and she had no one. And she's a good bit younger than me. And I saw her meeting after meeting, like just bawling in the bathroom. And I couldn't take it. And so I went up to her in the bathroom when we were alone, and I was like, hey, do you want to talk sometime? Like, you can come up to my house and talk. And she was like, somebody might see me. And I was like, we lived there, the high school was right above my house. And I was like, do you want to meet at the track at night when nobody can see us and we can walk? She was like, yes. So we started walking a couple times a week on the track every week until she got reinstated, because she just needed somebody to talk to. She had no one and nothing. She was divorced. She didn't have any kids. No one in her family would talk to her. She was like one of those typical witnesses that never made friends outside of the organization. So I was just making clear, not a good rule follower. I didn't tell other people any of these stories, but that's just how I did things. So I was questioning, there were things about the organization that I was like, this is wrong. Like, this is not how this should work. But I had never gotten in trouble either. No one ever knew these things about me. So at 37, I was having a bunch of people to my house. I mean a good many people. My kids were in their teens at this point. My son was 17. My daughter is a few years younger. And my son is very musically inclined. If you see my channel, he talks all about it. There's actually a video where he sings and plays at the end of it, and he's quite talented. And so he wanted a garage band, typical teenager, and so did a bunch of witness kids. They all wanted a grunge band, in the garage. And so I think Paramore was a big thing at the time. So they wanted this garage band, and I invited them all over so they could go out in the garage. I'm sorry if there's noise, my window's open. They went out in the garage, and all the parents were here because I was trying to keep it all, exactly how it should be. And there was like a couple elders, ministerial servants, some pioneers. There was a wide range of people, and they were playing songs that we had said they were allowed to play. Everything was on the up and up. And I told people, if you want to bring some alcohol, BYOB, because I don't drink. And some people brought some beer, some wine, and a few people had brought some different kinds of liquor. I didn't care. And it was all in the kitchen, so the kids would not just have easy access to it. And my dining room was right next to it, so we could keep an eye on everything. And not that any of them were trying to anyways, but just, we were trying to keep everything as it should be. And again, I had never had hard liquor in my life. And I was having a worn out day. I had done a lot, and I, again, had not been diagnosed as bipolar yet. And I was coming down off a high. I had been going, and I was up here, and I was starting to do this a little. I was coming down to a depression mode, and I must have looked it. And so somebody there, a ministerial servant actually, said to me, "You look like you need a drink." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And he's like, "I'm going to make you a vodka tonic." And I said, "All right." And I was like, "Well, I don't know if I like tonic. I guess I'll have Diet Coke with it." So he makes me one. He made it quite strong. And I threw that thing back in 2 seconds, not because I liked it. It was really terrible vodka. Because somebody that was probably like 22 brought it, and it was all they could afford. But it was because I very instantly felt the effects of it. And you have to also realize I had just been prescribed, because I was not diagnosed as bipolar correctly yet. I had been diagnosed as depressed, and I had just been put on a medication called Effexor that did not agree with me. It was not a good medication. And I had only been on it for maybe 2.5-ish weeks or so, 3 weeks. And I really should not have mixed this medication with alcohol. But because I never drank alcohol, I didn't even think about the fact that I was on this medication and shouldn't be mixing it. None of that came to mind. So he mixes me this. And so I'm sure that alcohol hit me faster because of that. I also had barely eaten this day. And again, had never drank hard liquor. So it hit me really quickly. And by the end of this first drink, and I think I said this to you in the pre-interview, I literally thought to myself, where has this been my whole life? Like, this is the best thing that ever just hit my body. Like, I need more of this. This needs to keep happening. And, and I will explain that an alcoholic, I'm not saying that somebody who's not an alcoholic doesn't like that relaxed feeling. I know they do. But an alcoholic is forever chasing that first time again, which you will never get back. And an alcoholic is drinking most of the time for effect, not for taste. And because I didn't like the taste of anything going into my mouth, but I was like, I want more of that feeling. I want that effect. So I was like, yeah, I'll take another. Yeah, give me another one of those. And you can make it just as strong. Thanks. So I drank another one, and I immediately was like, oh, I'm going to throw up. Because I had never drank before. I'm mixing it with medication. This was all a terrible idea. And I drank that. They might have poured me a third one, and I sipped a little of it. I can't remember. And they were all like, are you sure, Deanna, you want to do this? This is not a good idea. And they all were like, you've never drank before, have you? Like, they all knew I was not a drinker. So they're all like, are you sure you want to drink this much this fast? And I'm like, oh yeah, I'm fine. This feels great. And sure enough, after 2 drinks, I went in the bathroom and puked my brains out. Was not good. And so this was my first experience of drinking, but you would think that would have made me think like, oh, this was so bad, I should not drink again. But true to an alcoholic, I was like, well, that felt really good before the throwing up, so I think I want to do that again. But I also was super embarrassed. And I was like mortified that this happened in front of all these people, including like pioneers and ministerial servants and people of proper positions in the congregation and in various congregations. This was not just like from my kingdom hall. This was from a bunch of different kingdom halls. So I came out and I apologized. I started drinking a bunch of water and sobering up, and I apologized to everyone profusely and was like, I am so, so sorry. I can't believe I did that. And everyone's like, Deanna, we have never seen you drink before at all, let alone get tipsy, drunk, anything. It happens, it's happened to the best of us. I mean, like, these are the things people are saying. This is what elders are saying. It's happened to the best of us. Calm down. Not the end of the world. We know you're not going to do this again. Don't worry about it. And everyone left. It started to snow actually that night, so everyone left sort of early. And that was that, I thought. But there was one young man, because most of the people there were really close friends of mine. But there was one young man who was there visiting my son from a different congregation. And I didn't know him quite as well. And he was 14. Maybe 15, 14 or 15. And I think he was 14 though. And he went to his dad and to an elder at his congregation who came to an elder at my congregation and told the elder that we were having a rager, was his words, at our house, a rager. And that everyone was drunk. So they now took the word of one single kid, not two witnesses like you need for, CSA. The word of one little kid that we were having a rager, and they did a 4-congregation-wide shakedown of every single person that was at my house to find out what exactly happened and who was all drinking and how much and what all happened. And I'm like, you put this much effort into finding out that I was drunk, but you won't put that much effort into finding out when a child has been abused? But anyways, long story short, everyone said the same exact thing. Yes, because I told them all, like, don't lie. Just, tell them, yes, I got drunk. Let's, it is what it is. So everyone was like, yeah, she did, but she apologized. She didn't realize it was going to hit her so fast, blah, blah, blah. When I went before the elders, they told me, yeah, we want to talk to you. I walked into a judicial meeting. They did not tell me I was coming to a judicial meeting. And they started it, the elder that started it, started with the words, you realize this could end with you being disfellowshipped. That's how he started the meeting. No prayer, no kind words of, we just want to understand what you might be dealing with, sister. You realize this could end with you being disfellowshipped. And then when I started crying immediately, because I had never been in trouble in my life. I had actually been interviewed as a teenager at Three Rivers Stadium in Pittsburgh in front of, 20-some thousand people for being an exemplary youth, because I had pioneered for years and everything. I'm now in a shakedown because I got drunk one time. I'm like, okay. And I start crying and he tells me, don't think I'm going to take those tears as meaning that you're remorseful. You could just be putting those on. And I'm like, okay, where is the love in the shepherding? I don't understand what's happening right now. And it was horrific. The whole thing was horrific. It ended with him. He read 2 scriptures, one about drunkenness and one about a woman who was sexually promiscuous. I don't know how that applied because I've only ever been with my husband my entire life, so I don't know how that applied to anything, but okay. And it ended with them telling me I was going to be privately reproved. The next meeting I went was a Tuesday night meeting, and they told me when I got there they had changed their mind and I was going to be publicly reproved. I had a meltdown. I happened to know a circuit overseer, or a substitute circuit overseer. I called him And he was like, yeah, that's not how that's supposed to work. He called this elder. This elder got called and told, don't announce this till the circuit overseer comes. He was not happy with me, but they didn't announce it. My circuit overseer at the time happened to be coming like a couple weeks later. They talked to me, and it ended up getting announced as public anyways. And in the talk, they said, as an example, you may have never been a robber your entire life, but after you rob a bank one time, you will forever be remembered as a robber. So apparently, I was going to forever be remembered as a drunkard.